Welcome to Whose Family Is It Anyway? Birmingham edition. Today we have Alex Bingham, our new interim city clerk designee, with us today, and we're going to be looking into your past. How does that feel?
I'm really excited.
All right. So first off, I wanted to ask you, so you're just recently been appointed, and you come to this position with some exceptional recommendations. Oh my goodness, I looked online and saw your sort of like introduction into the city and was very impressed. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming our city clerk?
So way back when I was growing up, my mom worked for Commerce Township, and she ended up recruiting my dad and my sister to be election inspectors. I wasn't 16 years old yet, so I was the election day babysitter for all of the families that needed it. And so, you know, that's how the bug got in my ear. Like, elections, they're interesting, it's fun, you get to work and learn so many good things. So as soon as I was 16, I started training to be an election inspector, and I've worked for Commerce Township up until this past March as their trainer, as their problem solver, as their election specialist, extra help seasonally. And then I even, through college and as a teacher, because I went to Eastern Michigan University to become a teacher. So elections was always a good little part-time seasonal side gig specialty of mine. So I've always just been involved in that. But as I was teaching, I loved teaching, and it was a great career. But I had this opportunity to become the deputy clerk of Rose Township, and I thought, you know, teaching is awesome, but being a clerk is a little bit more specialized. It's a little bit more rare if you think of a community. Mm-hmm. In one community, if there's 5 schools, there's over 100 teachers. But in one community, there's only one clerk. So then I'm like, well, you know what? I've got a lot of experience. I've seen how clerks' offices work for years and years. Why not give it a go, give it a try? And it ended up being a really amazing decision and adventure and journey.
Oh, excellent.
So,
well, we're very lucky to have you, I can tell you that. So this past election, with the pandemic, elections got a lot more busy, let's say, in the clerk's office with the absentee voting and other things. And so several departments of the city of Birmingham jumped in to help with the extra volume. And of course, we at the museum, we were lucky enough to come and see firsthand a lot of what happens behind the scenes. It's the City Hall. I mean, it was like Grand Central Station in the office. We were a little overwhelmed at first with how much comes into City Hall, all the work that you guys do. For those people who have not had the privilege of seeing behind the curtain, can you tell us a little bit about a rundown of what you and your crew do at City Hall, kind of like a day in the life of?
Yeah, well, especially since COVID and everything's happened, our absentee voter demand has doubled or tripled, which is why you guys were like, wow, this is so much work. And you know, normally for us, 2,000, 3,000 absentee ballots, that's normal. But now, you know, for this presidential election, we're coming up with our mass mailing is going to be over 8,000 ballots, which is 3,000 more than you helped us prepare last time. So I can't wait to have you guys back in our office helping.
We'll be there.
But besides elections, you know, we're the information hub for the city. We keep all the important records. We help with preparing the agendas, agenda packets, minutes, calendars, events. It's just coordinating all these different residents' questions and directing them to where they need to go or the information that they need to find. And a lot of just making sure that we're on top of all the records, everything's organized, and we have all of that information readily accessible for whoever needs it.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. I know my favorite were the dog license calls, but people want to tell you all about their dog. And it's like, you just need the facts, ma'am. So you work now here in Birmingham, but even before you began work here in the city, you had ties to the city. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to Birmingham and what makes working here so special for you?
Well, I was really curious about the job posting when I saw the city clerk posting for Birmingham, and I thought, fresh out of teaching, I probably don't have enough experience. I was really nervous, but something just was like, Birmingham, that would be a really cool place to be. So a couple of my other clerk friends were like, go ahead, apply, take a stab at it. You might, go somewhere with this. And I was shocked when I got my first interview. I'm like, oh, this is going to be crazy. It's just going to be interview practice. I'm not really going to go anywhere with this. Then I got my second call interview, and I felt like I won the lottery. And during that time, I was hanging out with my parents, getting ready for that second interview. My dad was digging through the closet, and he found my great-grandpa's badge from when he was a firefighter for the city of Birmingham back in 1935, 1947 time range. And he gave it to me as a good luck charm for my second interview. And it was so cool at the end of the interview. They asked me if I had any other questions. And that's when because there was that little nepotism piece on the application. I'm like, well, I didn't know this for the first interview, but my grandpa used to work for the city of Birmingham, and I have his badge from the fire department. And it was, Commissioner Sherman was really interested in that, and he told me to go talk to the fire station and talk to the fire chief. And so that was, I don't know why, but just having that small connection from my great-grandfather, I'm like, man,
You
this
belong
would
here.
be really cool. I think I belong here.
Well, yeah, so when I first met you, I was quite intrigued by your last name, Bingham. And the reason is I was working on these set of letters that we had just recently got donated to they were written to a Rhoda Bingham. And they were written around the end of the 17th, beginning of the 1800s. And she was a woman who lived here in Birmingham. She married Hiram Daniels and had lots of children. But I was wondering, and I asked you, are you related to Rhoda Bingham? And you were kind of like, and then you kind of told me that you had heard that you might be related to some Binghams in the area. But how sure were you about that?
I wasn't really sure. My only big quest was to find a cool picture of my great-grandpa as a firefighter, because I want to kind of get a picture of him with the badge framed for my office, because I just think that'd be a cool treasure.
Yeah, unfortunately, I looked for you, because that's part of what our job is at the museum, is to help people find the connections. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we only have the volunteer fire department from the 1920s. Yeah. Our museum depends a lot on donations. Yeah. So we kind of have to wait for those donations to come in. Mm-hmm. So any of our viewers, if you have any pictures of Birmingham firefighters from the 1930s, 1940s, we would both love to see them. Just so that we can, maybe track down your photo of your great-grandfather. Yeah. So now, after I talked to you, it was a couple weeks before I could start digging into your family here in Birmingham. And when I did, I was quite shocked. Now, I know that I talked to you a little bit about some of your connections. Mm-hmm. How did you feel when I started telling you about the different connections that you had in Birmingham, much more than just your great-grandfather? Well,
the coolest thing is when you showed me those poems, I didn't realize they wrote all those acrostic poems way back then. So, I mean, to see true artifacts with my name and, when you were going over some of the content of those poems with me, I was like, wow, this is interesting. This is really cool. And there's so much to it, so a lot of it is I still need to process it and put pictures and names and faces together, but it really is cool to see that history come together and know so much about your past, because I feel like not many people get to do that. Yeah. So what a cool privilege it is to have that information and to know those stories.
All right, so I have found a lot more. in the past few weeks, the past few months after we first began talking. Are you ready to find out how your family has physically shaped Birmingham as we know it today?
Oh my gosh, that would be so incredible. I think that would be amazing.
Okay, so I'm going to start with your Bingham line.
Okay.
And we found out that your Bingham line is not actually the same as the Bingham line as Rhoda,
Sorry.
but she is related to you in a different line. So we will get to her. So all those beautiful poems, they do belong with your family. Well, they're staying in the museum, but but they are part of your family history. So that was exciting for me because I love those poems. Now, but don't worry, we will get to your connection to her. But I'm going to stick with the Binghams that you're directly related to. Now, you are actually directly descended from the Binghams of the village of Bingham Farms. So the original settler, your fourth great-grandfather, was David Bingham. And he is right here. He would come to Michigan when he was about 17 years old from Lincolnshire, England, where his parents lived and they did pass. He was born in 1839, and he would move here when he was just 17, and he would be a farm worker, just a farm hand, as early as 1862 in the area. In 1880, he would buy a farm of his own and a farmhouse, and where that farm and orchards are is pretty much the center of Bingham Farms Village. So the village was actually named after David Bingham, your great-great-great-great-grandfather. And the address is 32205 Bingham Road, which is just southwest of 14 Mile Road, and it still stands today. So you can go see that house if you would like to.
Oh my gosh.
Now, David had several sons, including your third great-grandfather, Lorenzo Bingham, and that is his picture here. So he was born in 1864 in Bloomfield Township. That's why we know that David Bingham was in the area before actually purchasing the house. And Lorenzo married Stella Mae Daniels, and it is this connection that ties you directly to the very beginnings of Birmingham. So she is going to be a very important figure in just a few moments. But again, I want to focus on the Bingham line for a few more minutes. Okay. So don't forget Stella, though. Now, another son of David Bingham's was Lorenzo's brother, Charles Bingham. And he founded the family insurance company, Bingham and Bingham, and set up business in the Wabeek building, right on Maple Road.
Oh, cool.
So Bingham and Bingham is not there, but the Wabeek building still is, and that is 280 West Maple Road. So now when you walk downtown in Birmingham, you've got a couple references to look for. So the Wabeek building is where Bingham and Bingham was set up. Now, we do have an oral history of Charles's son, Carson Bingham, in our archives. Yes, wow. Carson Bingham was the first cousin to your second great-grandfather, Glenn Howard Bingham. And he was actually the same age, however, as your great-grandfather, James Bingham, the firefighter in Birmingham. Cool. So they were about the same age. Okay. And they kind of grew up together.
Oh, that's awesome.
But Carson tells us in the family history that the family was friends with Harry Brooks, the very famous Henry Ford pilot.
Whoa! That's so cool.
Yeah. So, and Carson tells us that Harry Brooks had speakers mounted to the underside of his plane, and whenever he flew over Woodward, he'd call out people. And Carson says the best day was when he would hear Harry Brooks yell out, "Hello, Charlie Bingham," from the bottom of his plane. Now, Carson says that Harry gave him rides in Henry Ford's Model T, but he never gave him a ride in the airplane. Carson would eventually get his pilot's license, and some of the things he did was he liked to do barnstorming tricks for entertainment and to entertain Birmingham residents. So you got a little crazy in there.
That's where I get my party side.
All right. So Carson was one of the 5 individuals who drafted the Bingham Farms Charter. He did not want the village to be named after his family, but he was vetoed, and that's how Bingham Farms became Bingham Farms.
Oh,
It was
wow.
your family.
That's so cool.
So back to your direct line of Lorenzo and Stella. Now, Lorenzo and Stella had Glenn Bingham in 1887, and he is your second great-grandfather, and he would marry Martha Mattie Bush. Yeah, these
Right
two
here.
behind you. And this line, Mattie's line, is also quite connected to Birmingham and its founders, so we'll be exploring that line next. So Glenn and Mattie lived most of their married life at 911 Pierce, right at the corner of Barnum Park. Now, unfortunately, that house no longer stands. Glenn started off as a farmer, but he would become a mail carrier, and he took the rural routes. So he was still tooling around his family's farm and around Bingham Farms and other places like that, delivering mail. So that's what he did. He is noted as connecting the outer farms to Birmingham. So Glenn and Mattie Bingham had your great-grandfather, James Clifford Bingham, in 1912. Now, James married Evelyn Chasis, and they lived here in Birmingham until James's death at a very early 40 years old. So he died quite young. His obituary only states that he passed away after a very long illness, but it also states that he worked for Crane Company at the time of his death. Now, he is listed as a former member of the Birmingham Fire Department Volunteer Division, so that is there. And they lived at 731 Bird Avenue, which still stands. So you can see where they lived today. So you can drive by and I don't know if you want to go knocking on their door, but hey, I'm the city clerk. I want to come see inside your house. So the badge you showed us earlier was from your great-grandfather, James. And I'm sorry, like I said earlier, that we do not have any photographs of him. But, you know, Birminghamers, if you're out there and you've got photos, we'll take them. So now we're going to go back to Martha Mattie Bush. And she is your second great-grandmother. Mattie was the daughter of Myron Bush and Ida Mae Wooster. I don't know if you recognize the Wooster name at all?
A little bit, but
We have the historic Wooster Building, which still stands on Woodward Avenue, and the historic Eli Wooster Farmhouse, which is designated as a Birmingham Historic Home.
oh, that's so cool.
So you, through Ida Mae Wooster, you are connected to 2 prominent families in Birmingham, the Wooster family and the Nixon family. Now, the historic Eli Wooster house here in Birmingham was where Ida Mae grew up. And her father Eli was born in 1826 and bought the house from Joseph Utter in 1867. Now, some people may actually gasp when they hear the Utter name. I'm not sure if that rings a bell with you. Joseph Utter was the son of the very first murder victims here in Birmingham.
Oh no. Oh my god.
His mother and his sister Cynthia, he was about 15 when it happened, were attacked with an axe by Imre Fish at their home. They were both killed, and Imre would be not convicted due to insanity. But it's the reason why we have Greenwood Cemetery today. Ziba Swan would feel so bad that he donated the land for Greenwood Cemetery so that Cynthia and Polly Utter could have a proper burial.
Oh my
So he's the one that built your great-great-great-grandfather's house.
Oh my god.
Now, Ida Mae moved in when she was about 10 years old, but she did not move in with her mother. Unfortunately, her mother passed away when she was only about 2 years old, and so Ida would live under her father and with her stepmother. Now, Her stepmother was Mary Ann Beebe, and she would have several more children, including James. And James would be the one who would be responsible for the building of the Wooster Building, which you can still walk by today on Old Woodward.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to walk by all these buildings.
Yeah.
And know that like there's a small roots here and there and everywhere.
Well, we got a couple more for you. So Martha Nixon was actually Ida Mae Wooster's mother, who died when she was just 2 years old. She was actually one of the first children born in Birmingham, or in Southfield in 1832 to a William Nixon, and we're still trying to work on identifying his wife. But she would be born in Southfield in 1832. And Martha Nixon is your fourth great-grandmother. Now, she had a brother named Daniel, and he was father to two gentlemen named Volney and Chauncey Nixon. They would be Martha's nephews. Volney and Chauncey both opened stores in Birmingham. Now, while Volney's store no longer exists, the Arity Nixon building,
Right here.
Yep, that one you can see at 188 North Old Woodward. It's called the Arity Nixon building because Chauncey married Mary Arity, another very old Birmingham family. And it was her father and Chauncey who would go into business together, and they would be responsible for building that building. So that's just north of Maple on Old Woodward, and again, you can walk right by it and see a little piece of how your family changed the look of Birmingham, because they're responsible for how downtown Birmingham looks today. So how does that make you feel, knowing that several of these buildings on downtown Woodward are connected to you?
It's so cool. Like, it's so crazy to think that, you know, ancestors that I'm connected to were able to do this and build this.
So now I did promise you that I would get back to Stella, and she's the one that married Lorenzo. She is your third great-grandmother, and she connects you directly to the first families of Birmingham, the Daniels and the Hunters. So you've heard of John West Hunter by now, I'm sure.
Well, you've told me a lot.
So she was born in 1865 to Samuel Horton Daniels and Mary Ann Drake. And Samuel Daniels was the son of John Daniels Jr. and Julia Clark. John and Julia were the first settlers in the Southfield area. So your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, I'm not sure which set of greats it is, was the founder of Southfield.
That's so crazy.
So now, John's first house was built in 1823, was at the northeast corner of Bingham Roads and 13 Mile Road. The house stood there until the late 1990s, and it unfortunately burned down, but it stood for quite a long while. John and Julia, oh, here it is, were your fifth great-grandparents. So your fifth great founded Southfield.
So cool.
Now, John Daniels Jr. was born in 1793, and he was the son of John Daniels Sr., your sixth great-grandfather, who was married to Betsy Horton. Now, they moved to the Birmingham area around 1831 with their other son, Hiram Daniels, and daughter Clarissa Daniels. Now, I wanted to mention Clarissa because Clarissa in 1831 was actually on the deed for land here in Birmingham, which is quite abnormal to see a woman's name on a deed that early. But yes, so Clarissa Daniels was like one of the first women to purchase land in Birmingham.
Oh
So
my gosh.
she would jointly purchase it with her brother Hiram.
Okay.
Now, Hiram is where you are connected to Rhoda Bingham. Hiram married Rhoda Bingham, and they would have their family here in Birmingham. And the house that they built actually still stands today.
Yay! I'm gonna be
So-
walking all over Birmingham. Like, there's some of my family. There's some of my family.
So it is located at 1128 Pierce, and you can still walk by that house today. So Hiram and Rhoda Bingham Daniels raised their family in that home. And Now, Rhoda Daniels would marry Hiram in 1836, and that's when she moved to Birmingham. Now, her first son, Hiram Franklin Daniels, so the first cousin to your great-great-great-great-grandfather, survived the Andersonville prison during the Civil War, and we actually have his certificate at the museum. So you can stop by one day when the pandemic's over and take a look at that. Now, most of these people that I mentioned, pretty much all of the Daniels, are buried at Greenwood Cemetery, so you can actually go and visit them at their graves.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so it'll be kind of neat to be able to go. But one last thing back to John Daniels Sr. His wife was Betsy Horton. They were your sixth great-grandparents, and John served during the Revolutionary War. He is also buried at Greenwood Cemetery, and John Sr. is honored for his service every year by the Piety Hill chapter of the DAR. So
cool.
So you'll have to visit on like Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and you can see how his grave is still decorated to this day for his service.
Oh my gosh. So fantastic.
So I want to show you one thing that we do have, the Daniels genealogy book. This book was donated to us this past year.
Oh wow.
It was published in 1951 by the Daniels family, and I want to show you your line. So as you can see, under Samuel Horton, we have Stella May, married to Lorenzo Bingham, and their children, Glenn H., who married Mattie Bush.
Oh, cool. Are there any other copies of this book anywhere?
There are not. That is in our archives now. It's part of our permanent collection. But you are more than welcome, just like the rest of Birmingham, when we are open, to come and do research in our archives.
That's so cool. So is it all scanned? Like I could go back and read parts
That one
of it?
is not scanned yet.
Okay. Well, will it?
One day.
Okay.
One day.
Okay.
But of course, without these donations,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing today.
Right.
So we definitely thank all those Birminghamers out there that donate to our museum, because they make this kind of fun stuff possible. So now I want to look at Mary Ann Drake, who married Samuel Daniels. She was born in 1836 to Walter Drake and Adeline Hunter. And Adeline Hunter was sister to none other than John West Hunter. So he is your fifth great uncle.
Oh, cool.
So when you come visit the Hunter house now, you can kind of see where Adeline possibly grew up. The reason why I say that is that she was about 11 years old when they traveled from New York to Birmingham. He would purchase the land in 1819, and build his house. The house that we have at the museum was built in 1822. His father would bring over the rest of the family in 1819 by steamer ship.
Wow.
Adeline was about 10 to 11 years old, and they kind of all stayed together until Daniel Hunter and Elijah Hunter. Elijah Hunter was Adeline's father. So your sixth great-grandfather, and Daniel was his son, Adeline and John West Hunter's brother. They purchased land in Birmingham as well, but at this time period, you kind of lived as a big, huge, happy family until all the individual houses were built. Mm-hmm. So it's very possible, I'm not saying it's 100%, but it's very probable that Adeline lived in the Hunter house at some point in her life.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that is how you are connected to John West Hunter and the founding here of Birmingham. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about Daniel, Adeline's brother. Now he did not stay in the area for long. He was actually one of the 4 men who were commissioned to survey what is now Chicago.
Oh, what?
He take his wife and his small family. He had a daughter at about age 4, and they were the only 4 European families in the area. So basically, your great-great-great-great uncle, Daniel, founded Chicago.
What?
Now, the family did return to Birmingham, and Daniel's daughter, Cornelia, actually gives an account in the 1890s of her time in Chicago, even going as far as telling us a story about a scalping. And we have a copy of that little interview that she did back in 1890.
Is this all pre-mafia?
This is all pre-mafia. So now these are the ties that you have, just a few of the ties. Because honestly, the Hunters and the Daniels and the Woosters and the Nixons married into other families, giving you many more cousins that we have not even touched on. Like the Bassett family, the Whitting family, the Blakesley family, the Beardsley family, and more. So basically, you have ties to just about every early family here in Birmingham. Now, can you tell me what you're thinking about that?
Wow.
I mean, just a half an hour ago, you had one connection to Birmingham, your great-grandfather, and now you're connected to the original founders.
I guess it kind of makes you think of a small world. Like, who knew like how expansive these connections could be? I had no idea that there would be this many connections to this many cool, and all the stories, like all these tiny little cool stories that you have. It's just, wow.
This is going to be like tracing you to the colonies, to the very beginnings of not just Birmingham, but the very beginnings of the United States.
What?
So,
oh my gosh, I wish my history teachers could see me right now.
Now, I only did this because while I was researching the Hunter line, I came across just some absolutely fascinating stories that went further back, and I personally had no choice but to go down the rabbit holes. I mean, you know, and it benefits the museum too, but but it was a lot of fun.
So you hopped around a lot.
I hopped around a lot. Well, so the Hunters are one of the 4 founding families of Birmingham, so they're an important family to us. So while I was researching, you know, especially Stella Daniels Bingham and how she was related to the Hunters, I kind of stumbled upon some more ancestry books and things like that. So I'm going to continue with the Hunter line. So Elijah Hunter was the son of Elad Hunter and Elizabeth Carter, your 7th generation, your 7th greats. Elad Hunter was the son of Elijah Hunter and Sarah Atwood, your 8th greats. Sarah Atwood was the daughter of Elad Atwood and Anne Snow, your 9th greats. Anne Snow was the daughter of Captain Mark Snow and Anne Cook, your 10th greats. And Captain Mark Snow was the son of Nicholas Snow and Constance Hopkins, your 11th greats. Now, the reason why I'm doing this fast is because it gets good. It gets good. Constance Hopkins, your 11th great-grandmother, traveled to the colonies on the Mayflower.
Oh my gosh.
In 1620. Now, she was born in 1598 to Stephen and Mary Hopkins near Hursley, England, but her mother died when she was about 15 years old in 1613. Constance is actually mentioned in her mother's probate as her father was in the Americas at the time of her mother's death. Constance's father, Stephen Hopkins, is probably one of the most interesting grandparents you have.
Uh-oh. What did he do?
What did he do? So he is your 12th great-grandfather, and he's also the 5th great-grandfather to Adeline and John West Hunter. Now, before taking his whole entire family on the Mayflower to settle in Plymouth, he actually sailed to Jamestown on the Sea Voyager in 1609 as a minister's clerk. The ship wrecked on the Isle of Devils, now known as Bermuda, and the crew was stranded for over 10 months. According to the logs, they survived on turtles, birds, and wild hogs. 6 months into the castaway, he was part of a mutiny against the current governor that they had elected. And the mutiny was discovered and Stephen was sentenced to death.
Oh my gosh.
He pleaded, quote, because this was all recorded, with sorrow and tears, so penitent was he and made such a moan, alleging ruin of his wife and children in the trespass, as it wrought in the hearts of all the better sorts of the company, and his sentence was commuted. So he was not sentenced to death. Thankfully, because the story wouldn't,
I could not imagine living off of turtles. No, thank
Now,
you.
Eventually, the castaways built a kind of ship raft kind of thing, and they were able to sail it to Jamestown. Now, it is not known how long he stayed in Jamestown, but he was still there when his wife passed back in England in 1613. He did return at some point, and he married Elizabeth Fisher, and his entire family, including Constance, sailed to America on the Mayflower. Now, he was known to be very cantankerous. He had many more brushes with the law.
Oh boy.
And but because he had the fortune of being on the Mayflower, you can actually look him up and check out a lot more on him. You will be
that's so
surprised.
fun.
But that's not the only connection you have to the Mayflower.
Oh my gosh. There's always more.
Yes. So you have a second connection through Myron Bush, your third great-grandfather, who was married to Ida Wooster. So I think he's behind me. Now, Myron was the son of Orrin Bush and Louisa Bateman. Orrin Bush was the son of Alanson Bush and Sarah Sally Mead. And Sarah Sally Mead was the daughter of Fat Tim Mead III and Phoebe Crippen, who was your fifth greats.
Sounds like an interesting fella.
He is. So, I do have to mention to you why the name Fat Tim.
I know.
Okay. Now, both Timothy Mead III, your sixth great, and his father, Timothy Mead Jr., your seventh great, fought in the Revolutionary War. So now you're connected to at least 3 Revolutionary War soldiers. So the DAR is going to be knocking on your door. But unfortunately, that is not what made the news when he died.
Oh boy.
Though Timothy Mead died near Rochester, New York, his story was picked up by several newspapers on the East Coast, including the Nantucket Enquirer for October 1828. Okay, now keep in mind, newspapers at this time love to go with the most sensational and sometimes extremely graphic descriptions, more so than even today.
Oh boy.
I am going to read you the Nantucket Enquirer for October 28th.
Oh my goodness.
Near Rochester, New York, Mr. Timothy Mead, aged about 80, weighed over 500 pounds.
McDonald's wasn't invented yet, right?
So, and being opened after his decease, the thin part of his breast was found to measure 4 inches in thickness, and the thin part of his abdomen 8 inches. Yes, they cut him open to measure his fat. That's how large he was.
Oh my goodness.
He was 5 foot 8 inches in height and had not seen his feet in 10 years. He was interred in a coffin bound with iron hoops and lowered into his grave with a tackle. He was so large, and this was so uncommon at the time, that he made it into national news.
Oh my God.
So, yes. So, now the line continues on with Phoebe Crippen, your sixth great-grandmother, who was then married to Timothy Mead III, Fat Tim. Now, she was the daughter of Jabez Crippen Jr. and Lydia Chamberlain, your seventh greats. And then Jabez Crippen Jr. was the son of Jabez Crippen Sr. and Thankful Fuller, your eighth greats. Now, Jabez Sr. and Thankful had several children, including John Crippen. Now, I'm going to deviate for just a second from the Mayflower line because this is another good story.
Oh, okay. Love a good story.
So, the line goes from John to Ezra's to Bradley to Philo to Myron. And that is how you are related to your fifth cousin, fourth removed, Dr. Holly Crippen, the perpetrator of the infamous London cellar murder. The murder was so shocking that several plays, books, and even movies have been made over the year on him. He murdered his second wife by separating her limbs and flayed her flesh. He then buried the flesh in his basement and is suspected of scattering her limbs throughout London. I mean, it was a horrific crime.
Oh my God.
Now, he is also suspected of killing his first wife, but he escaped the United States and moved to London before he could be tracked down. She wrote letters to her family stating that if she died, it would be his doing because he experimented surgically on her.
What?
She would
Oh my gosh.
she would die by a brain bleed while she was 8 months pregnant. He, Dr. Holly Crippen, was the one that signed her death certificate and had her buried before she could be examined.
Oh my
So
gosh.
he's suspected of murdering her too. And he was also accused of murdering his business partner, but was acquitted, not on the evidence, but because he seemed too nice to have did the deed. Now I've got something for you. The latest book, which was just written this year on Dr. Holly Crippen.
Oh my gosh.
That is by Eric Larson, and it is about the murder, the London cellar murder that was committed
Oh my goodness.
by your cousin. So that is a gift to you from us at the museum. So, just some light reading material. Maybe you could give a copy to everyone in your family.
Well, the joke the other day too was that you guys should do the background investigations because you found way more than the police department did.
Yeah, I think the police might be a little jealous after this one.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
You'll have to, maybe they can be like Christmas presents for everybody in your family this year. All right, so now back to the direct line with Thankful Fuller, your 8th great grandmother who married Jabez Crippen Sr. Thankful was the daughter of John Fuller and Mehetabel Rowley, the 9th great. And John Fuller was the son of Samuel Fuller and Jane Lathrop, your 10th greats. Samuel Fuller was your other link on the Mayflower. He was 12 years old when he sailed on the Mayflower with his father and his mother and almost sister Alice. She would actually be born on the Mayflower or right after they landed. Now, Edward Fuller, his father, your 11th greats, was also on the Mayflower, and he was actually one of the signatories on the Mayflower Compact. Yes.
Oh, wow.
So you have an 11th great grandfather that signed the Mayflower Compact.
Oh my gosh.
Sadly, both him and his wife, who was only identified as wife of Edward, died just a few months after landing, and him and his sister, so Samuel and his sister Alice, who was still an infant, went to live with their uncle Samuel, who was also a passenger on the Mayflower. Now, I've given you a lot of information.
Yep.
Are you ready for the last relative that I want to introduce?
Oh boy.
So here's the last relative that I wanted to introduce to you before the lightning round.
Oh boy.
So Samuel Fuller's wife, your 10th great grandmother, was the daughter of Reverend John Lathrop and Hannah House, your 11th great grandparents. John Lathrop was an English Anglican clergyman who became a Congregationalist minister and immigrated to New England. He was among the first settlers in Barnstable, Massachusetts, which I just want to add, it's also where the hunters were at the same time. So
Oh,
the
wow.
hunters, probably considering that Barnstable was only like a few hundred, probably knew the Fullers.
Mhm.
And I've always kind of seen it as they were together and then they kind of went whoop, and then married in Birmingham, 300 years later.
Oh, wow.
But he was one of the first settlers of Barnstable. That's not what he's famous for. John Lathrop has a few claims to fame, but most notable, he was a strong proponent of the separation of church and state. This is an idea that was considered quite heretical in England during the time, but due to his influence and those like him, this idea became a founding principle of our nation.
Oh.
So the idea of separation of church and state was propagated by your 11th grade grandfather, John Lathrop.
That's amazing.
Maybe that's why, clerking and elections is so important to you. It's in your blood. You had no choice.
Right?
Now, John Lathrop was the father of at least 8 children by his first wife, Hannah House. And after her death, he married Anne and had 7 more. Now, he was very lucky in that almost all of his children made it to adulthood, and they had multiple children themselves and continued the line. It is now estimated that he has tens of thousands of descendants walking around the United States today, including you. Now I'm going to read off, this is our lightning round. I'm going to read off some of his most famous direct descendants, and and these are all people who can claim him to be a numbered great-grandfather. Okay. Not like an uncle, grandfather.
Oh, wow.
Just like you. So, are you ready?
Yeah.
This is going to be fast.
Okay.
This is going to be, I'm doing it in order of birth, so the closest. So the 3rd grade, it starts with the 3rd grade, and we're going to run down to the 12th grade.
Okay.
In order. So and remember, because he had so many children, some of these may have been born after, but are listed before because of the
where
lineage, where it falls. Okay, so here's who you're related to.
Okay.
Benedict Arnold, Harry Wadsworth Longfellow, Eli Whitney, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., 18th U.S. President Ulysses S. Grant.
What?
Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormon Church. Edith Caro Roosevelt. Louis Comfort Tiffany. Marjorie Post, founder of General Foods. J.P. Morgan. Alfred Fuller, founder of the Fuller Brush Company. Dr. Holly Crippen, the infamous murderer. Henry Sturgis Morgan, co-founder of Morgan Stanley. 32nd U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. John Hinckley Jr., who shot Ronald Reagan.
Oh my God.
Shirley Temple.
Yes! That's a good one!
Possibly Amelia Earhart. They're pretty sure.
Oh my gosh, that would be so cool.
Georgia O'Keeffe. Kiera Sedgwick. Clint Eastwood. Dick Clark. Sarah Palin. 41st and 43rd Presidents George W.H. and George W. Bush.
Oh my gosh.
Don Knotts. Jeb Bush. Ethan Hawke. And the current Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson. Now, I did promise you a Marvel Universe character.
Ooh, I can't wait.
You are also related to...
Oh boy.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I wasn't expecting that one.
Mysterio.
Oh, that's so cool.
So
that's so crazy.
So he is a 10th great grandson of John Lathrop, and you are an 11th.
Oh my gosh.
Now this is just a small sampling, but how do you feel knowing that you're related to several presidents, some wonderful women, some artists, writers, people who shaped America?
It's overwhelming. Like, to think, like, here I am just doing my little thing, not realizing the big picture and the web underneath me.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking of right now. It's just, wow.
Yeah. So you're going to approach your job probably a little different, thinking that it was your 11th grade grandfather who made what we do today possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any questions?
Oh my gosh. How many hours did this take you to figure all this out and put it all together?
Well, honestly, the Mayflower part was easy because a lot has been done on the Mayflower.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, like I said, as soon as I hit that Hunter line, and I was like, it was all mapped out for me. So I just wanted to verify, make sure that a lot of that stuff was for real, and so that was fairly easy. The truth is that doing the stuff here in Birmingham, we had a lot of stuff on the individuals, but we didn't know the connections.
Yeah.
So it was finding those connections. But once those connections were found, it was like, oh, James Wooster, okay, well, we know he did this, and we know he did this, and we know he did this. So
yeah.
But it's all work that goes towards our archives.
Yeah.
So I really don't, it's actually a joy for me to do this.
What were some of your biggest surprises on this project?
I would have to say the Stephen Hopkins connection to the Hunters, because I was just dying over that one. I was like, wow, John West Hunter had some fun, some fun relatives. But I think it was also finding that when I was first disappointed that you were not related to Rhoda Bingham. Because I loved her letters. They were,
Yeah.
I just love them. They're beautiful, and I really wanted you to be related to her somehow, But then when I found, when I found that roundabout connection, and that, that she is her niece, I was just like, oh gosh, yes, it's there. So that was. I was like, yay, you are connected. Maybe not by blood, but definitely by marriage, and that was exciting for me. So,
Thank you.
I think both of us are going to walk down Woodward and feel a little different.
I know, I want to do like a walking tour now of like, my family did this, my family did that.
I think this wraps up Whose Family Is This Anyways? Birmingham edition. And thank you, Alex Bingham, for being my guinea pig on this journey through Birmingham.
Thank you so much. This was incredible. It was so cool.